Do you want to be a good storyteller? If so, these are the 5 things that you want to avoid at all costs. Hey guys, how's it going? Tony Segovia here. In today's video, I'm going to be talking about how not to do storytelling. 5 things that you want to avoid at all costs. These 5 things are basically using your brand as an unrelatable character, as an unrelatable main character, not knowing how to tell good stories, providing too much information, only sharing successes, and finally, telling your story to the wrong audience. So starting with using your brand as an unrelatable main character, I mean, the title of this thing speaks for itself. Regardless if you use or you don't use your brand as the main character of your story, the main character of your story always has to be relatable with your audience. Your audience has to be able to relate with your main character. You want your audience to feel part of your story, right? Especially if you're using your brand as your main character. This would actually be my case. In my particular case, I am the brand of my business. You know, Tony Segovia is the brand of my business. So I am the brand of my business, and I tell my story. And I'm the main character of my story, right? What I want to do is my audience to really feel identified with me in this case, because I'm the main character, right? So, for example, I'm going to be talking about, how I'm starting, an online business from scratch, how I'm really developing, my personal brand, how I want to help other people out, create their businesses and really, create their long-term businesses, right? And I'm going to be developing my story around all the experiences that I have. I'm going to be sharing all the lessons that I learned. I'm going to be talking about the problems and pains that I have, for example, how I want to avoid being part of the being part of the 9 to 5 job schedule, not being able to have the creative freedom to do whatever I want with my business, not being able to reach my life goals, all of this is just part of my main character, and I want to be able to. And the idea here is that my audience feels related to me, since I'm the main character. I want to really relate to my audience, because I want my audience to experience my story. I want my audience to experience and join my journey and feel part of my journey as well. Feel that they're me going through my journey, right? And like I said, if you're going to use your brand as your main character, this is even more important, because you want your people to have a good perception of your brand. And by creating a main character, using your brand, but creating a main character that your audience simply can't relate with him or her, or with it, right? Then it's awful, because your audience is going to have an awful perception of your brand, right? And you definitely don't want this. So, like I said, you can use your brand as your main character as long as it's relatable. You don't want to use your brand as an unrelatable main character. That's thing number 1. Thing number 2 would be not knowing how to tell a good story. So in one of my past videos, I talked about how storytelling is divided in 2: story and telling. Story being the message itself, and telling being the way you communicate that message, you tell that story, right? So you want to be able to always stick to the point of your message. You want to be clear with the message that you are transmitting. Now, in one of my past videos, I did talk about how in some cases, in the way you tell your story, you want to give your audience you want to tell your story in a way that your audience has to figure out what's the message. That's okay. I mean, that's all right, but you want to be sure that you do this right, because you want your audience to be clear in regards to what your message is, right? You want to be clear with that, and you want to be clear and stick to your message. You want to stick to the point that you're trying to make always. You don't want to go on by the tangent, and also you don't want to go on the tangent, right, regarding to the point that you're trying to make. And also another very important thing is, the pace of your storytelling, right? The pace in which you tell your story. You don't want to tell your story in a way that is just way too long, way too boring, that you're going to lose your audience's interests. You want to grasp them, from the start, and that's why you need to tell a story in a way that is, that involves your audience, in a way that they feel identified with the story, in a way that they really can imagine and visualize the point that you're trying to make. Right? This is extremely important, right? So that would be thing number 2. Thing number 3 would be giving out too much information, right? So this is part of this is actually, this is a third separate thing, but this is very related to the last thing that I just mentioned. Not knowing how to tell a good story is related to this, because you want to be clear and concise with what you're communicating. What I mean by this is that just, it's alright. I mean, it's alright that I create, for example, in my personal case, in my particular case, that I create valuable content for my audience to learn, for my audience to really, take that knowledge that I'm sharing with them and applying it. That's alright. That's no problem. That's actually a great thing. But if I start to, just provide my audience with tons of overwhelming information, then it's not going to make sense, because first of all, it's going to push my audience away from the message that I'm trying to transmit and from the point that I'm trying to make. And also, my audience is going to get startled, and they just simply won't want to stick to my story, and they simply wouldn't want to keep on watching my content. Why? Because I provide too much information. I want to be extremely concise, and I want to be really really clear and really straight to the point in regards to the information that I'm providing, right? So that's definitely the third part, right? The third thing that you want to avoid. The fourth thing you want to avoid is only sharing your successes. In one of my past videos, I talked about how perfection doesn't exist. Perfection doesn't exist. We, as humans, we're not perfect. And guess what? Your audience is going to relate much more with someone who's not perfect, and with someone who shares his or her failures, and with someone who really shares, all the mistakes they made, all the errors they made, all the small pitfalls they had, right? And and sharing that and embracing that as part of your learning curve and your journey, than someone than relating with Mr. or Mrs. Perfect, right? That never made a mistake in their whole lives, and that they're now successful and they're living their dream. You know what I mean? Reality is, people will relate to someone who makes mistakes. People will relate to someone that has had his or her own failures. People will relate to that, because guess what? We all fail. We all make mistakes. We all make mistakes. We all have mistakes, and failure is part of our learning curve in every single aspect in our lives. Regardless if it's our business, regardless if it's school, regardless if it's a sport that we're practicing, regardless if it's a relationship, we all experience failure and mistakes throughout our learning curves. And people will always relate to that, right? People will always relate to that. So, for example, in the journey, in this journey that I'm taking on, this online business journey that I'm on, I'm going to be sharing all the experiences that I've been going through, right? All the experiences, including my failures and the mistakes that I've made. And I can tell you right now that one of the mistakes that I've made is not thinking through when it comes to some of the content that I've posted. I mean, I've posted some content that I shouldn't have posted, but that's alright, because it's part of the journey. It's part of the mistakes that I've made, and it's part of my learning curve. That's okay. There's no problem with that. And also another thing, the way I make my videos, sometimes I make mistakes during my videos. I think I've actually made a couple of mistakes now, right? And that's okay, because it's natural. It makes me authentic, and it makes me look and feel natural to my audience, right? So that's thing number 4. I mean, people, and another thing very important, another thing regarding thing number 4 that I want to mention is that people don't really care about your successes. I mean, you can use them as part of your story, but you cannot use them as the main idea behind the message that you're transmitting. Why? Because the only thing people care about is how you can help them solve their problem. Is that thing that they can get out of you, that lesson, that solution that they can get out of you in order to solve their problem. What people really care about is how you can help them solve their problems, how they can get rid of their problems, and how can you be part of that. They don't really care, the successes that you've had. What they really care about is how you can help them out, right? Is what they're getting, what are they going to be getting from you? That's what people really care about. The fifth and final thing would be telling your story to the wrong audience. And you can summarize this thing into the simple fact of not knowing who your audience is. Not knowing who your audience is. So if you start, for example, if you start talking about, if your story, if you're telling your story about how to, about how to start an online business from scratch and all this to very advanced entrepreneurs and very advanced, business owners. And if you're targeting, and if your content is about, how to start an online business from scratch, and you're targeting all of this to advanced business owners and advanced entrepreneurs, then you're making a huge mistake here, because you're throwing your story, you're talking to people that are already experienced, and that they actually might even have more experience than you have, right? So if I start telling them, if I start targeting my content to this type of people, to these entrepreneurs or business owners, online business owners that have already been in the game for years now, they're not going to pay attention to my story, because they're not going to relate with it. They're not going to really relate, they're not going to relate to any of the elements within my story, and it just simply makes no sense. It simply makes no sense, right? So, but if I, for example, instead of telling these entrepreneurs how to start a business, if I start talking about, for example, and transmitting and telling a story of how, I had my business and I was suffering, from sale losses, and I was not being able to retain my clients and so on, and then I started doing this and this and that, and I started creating this sales process that really helped me out, for example, sales funnels, or if I started, applying these techniques that helped me retain my clients and that helped me get new clients, new and recurring clients for my business, and that help me, increase conversions or increase my traffic, then I'm talking in their language. Then I'm actually they're going to feel related with me. Why? Because I'm going to be talking about the problems that I've had and that I've been able to solve. And the problems that I've had are going to be similar to the problems that they currently have and that they want to solve. That's a different thing, right? That's a different situation. But if I tell them how to start their businesses online, what they have to do and all of that, and again, I'm talking to people that have been in this game for years, then it makes no sense, right? So that's basically the 5 things that you want to avoid. To quickly summarize it: using your brand as an unrelatable main character, not knowing how to tell good stories, providing too much information, only sharing your successes, and telling your story to your wrong audience. That would be it for this one, guys. Hope you liked it. Hope you enjoyed it. If you did, guys, I'm creating a private Facebook group, a community where I'm going to be sharing tips, tricks, on how to start your online business from scratch, as well as how to scale your current online business, right? So, if you're interested and want to learn more, feel free to join. And yeah, guys, that's been it for this one. Hope you liked it. Hope you enjoyed it. Take care and keep on hustling.